Hello friends, this is David Sami with A Christian Journey. I want to welcome you to Tuesday night Bible study. Tonight we want to take a look at marriage vows. What do they mean and what is its purpose? I know over the years I have had many people that come to me and say, David, we are in a committed relationship, we love each other, we live together, and why do we need to have a marriage license? Why do we need a piece of paper to say that we are married? What's a big deal about a piece of paper? After all, for all intensive purposes, we are married. We just don't have that piece of paper. But what we want to look at tonight is our marriage vows. Are they just in order for us to have a piece of paper that say we are married? Or are they much more? And that's what we want to look at. We want to look at what do they mean and what do we promise to one another. Now, in order for us to get a good glimpse of a traditional vows, I actually studied a Presbyterian wedding ceremony that took place about 100 years ago. And I wanted to see what the minister would say to the couple and what does a traditional vow looks like. Now, I'm not going to say everything that they say during the ceremony, but just highlight the main points of what does it mean when we make a vow to one another, and maybe put some of my own thoughts and conclusion in those phrases and sentences. So let's see, what does it mean when we make a commitment to one another and we take our vows before each other in marriage. The first thing maybe would be helpful is to recognize what does the word vow means. What do we mean by vow? Vow is a solemn promise, a promise that is not a casual one that is formal, sincere, and that you are going to do your utmost to keep it. It's almost as if we say, I swear to do this. I will give you my wholehearted promise that I will fulfill the following and do what I'm saying. That's what the word vow means. So when we stand before the minister, this is what we are saying, and then the things that we are going to say to one another, we are promising with our utmost sincerity to fulfill. Now, the first thing the minister would say is, dearly beloved, we are assembled here in the presence of God to join this man and this woman in holy marriage. In other words, we are all gathered here together, and God is present here. God is witnessing this ceremony, and the minister, as God's representative, is presiding over the ceremony. And the guests, they are not only friends and loved ones, but they are also witnesses to what we are saying to one another and what we are committing to each other as a couple. And then, I think, looking back, I think it is a good idea that we be sure that we are right for each other. As a matter of fact, I'm going to talk a little bit more about this, the importance of knowing that we should be together. Then the minister would turn to the man and say, repeat after me. And the man would say, I take you to be my wedded wife. In other words, that I take you from among all the other women in the world to be my wife. I selected you to be my wife. And the wife would repeat the same word, that I take you to be my wedded husband, that from all other men, I have chosen you to be my husband. Now, after 33 years of marriage, I think it is so important that when we are standing before a minister to get married, that we would have an assurance in our heart that the other person is the one that I should be with. That this decision was not taken casually or haphazardly, but I have given it a lot of thoughts and prayer before I have come to this conclusion to take you to be my wife or to take you to be my husband. That a lot of thought has gone into this, and I am absolutely convinced that you are the one. Because during the course of marriage, there's gonna come times that you doubt. You look at your spouse and you think, how on earth did we ever end up with each other? We have nothing in common. I don't know how we ended up getting married. You see, there would even come times that you may even look at your spouse and you may not even like your spouse. And these are normal things that could happen in a marriage. This is nothing out of ordinary. It's normal. It's normal sometimes to really not even like each other, or to may feel like I made a mistake, that maybe I should have waited, somebody else would have come along. But you see, you want to fall back on the notion that you know that you should be with this person. And in spite of how you feel and what you may think right now, that you knew that this person is the one and that you have joined yourself to that person. That knowledge is very important during those valleys that we go through in our marriage, to see us through that. Now, regardless of what I'm thinking, I should have been with this person, and I'm gonna go through no matter how I feel. But the question is, if you aren't married, if you're just living together, and you go through these times, what is there to keep you? Because you see, you haven't made that firm commitment before God to take the other person in marriage. You just thought that we are the right couple, we should be together, and everything felt right, and you live together, and you feel just as a married couple. But when the time does come that, no, I don't feel the same. I think our relationship has run its course, and to be honest with you, I just don't have any more feeling for you. What is there to keep us together? You see, it would be so much easier to walk away from that relationship rather than knowing that, no, I made a solemn promise before God. And whether I am unhappy right now or whether I don't feel like you are the right person, I am committed to this relationship. Now, you have your own choice to make, but as far as it depends on me, because I made this commitment before God, I am staying in marriage in spite of how I feel. That's how our attitude should be. Now, I know many of us, unfortunately, we don't look at our commitments that way, but we ought to look at it that way. That's why it's so important to understand that we are making these vows and these commitments before God. And my partner or my spouse can do whatever they want. But as for me, I will fulfill what I promise. Then the man will go on to say, and I do promise and covenant to be your loving and faithful husband. In other words, I agree and I assure you in regard to two things. Number one, to be your loving husband, and number two, to be a faithful husband. Now again, the woman would say the same thing to her husband to be, that I would be a loving wife and I would be a faithful wife. Now, to be a loving husband, both in attitude and in action. That means that my attitude toward you is going to be one of kindness and gentleness, not harshness or meanness. I will be considerate and caring. That's how my attitude will be toward you. But not only that, but I also would consider what is best for you. I have your well-being at heart, and I do my utmost to take care of you, to look after you, and always consider what is best for you. That's what it means to be a loving spouse. You see, today, unfortunately, we are so independent that when we come together, we feel like, okay, well, you know, I have my part and you have your part, but I have my life and you have your life. And sometimes that independence, it kind of keeps us from really gelling with one another. But I have made a point that in my marriage, I would be kind and gentle with my wife, and I would consider her well-being and what is good for her above my own. And I know to a greater extent my wife has done the same thing. That's why we both have put the other person's well-being above our own at times, or bare minimum, we are considerate of what's good for them. And this has brought us together, gelled us together. But not only that, but we also have paid a price for one another, because there have been times that I have done things that I did not want to do, but I knew that those things would make my wife happy. So I did them. And as a result, I have paid a price for my wife, and she has become important to me. And I could never walk away because of the value that she has in my eyes. And I think to a certain extent, the value that I have in the eyes of my wife, because we have tried to love each other. But the second part is that I would be a faithful spouse. Now, faithful basically would have the idea of a steadfast loyalty. That I would be loyal to you. That you, after God, would be the most important person in my life. And you will have my wholehearted loyalty. I'll always be on your side. But not only that, but I think also in marital faithfulness, that from this day forward, I will not consider any other woman romantically, that I would only look at you and you alone romantically. We should, once we get married, we should never entertain the thought about having romantic relationship with someone else. And I know men and women, maybe at times they may have different areas of temptations, and for men this could be one of the big areas that we could fall trap to. But I have learned over time and from the scriptures that we need to guard our mind and especially our imagination. That if I ever have any impure thought come to my mind, I just cancel it out. I don't dwell on it. I don't think about it. Because sometimes it would be easy to maybe look at someone else and admire their beauty and slowly take that few steps further and imagine things and picture things in our mind, things that are impure, things that are kind of unholy. But you see, then that becomes gradually a pattern, a habitual pattern, and we can easily drift away to areas that we never thought we could go. Not only that, but also I think we can open ourselves up to be influenced by impure spirits or unclean spirits. These spirit beings that are all around us, and they are ceremonial and morally impure. They could come because we are drifting away in their direction. They could come and, in a sense, fan the flame of these passions. And when we think about these things, we only think of the pleasure and the enjoyment they bring. We never think of its consequences and the hurt and damage that they would do, not only to our spouses, but also to ourselves. We only see one side of the coin, and that is an illusion, that's a lie. So we need to make sure to know that from this point on, this man or this woman would be the only one that I would consider romantically. And I am promising them before God that that will be the case. But also one more note in this juncture. I think it'd be important in churches that men and women both would have, in a sense, a collective gathering with each other. That if one of us find ourselves struggling in these issues, we be able to come and talk openly with our brothers. Or if you're a woman and we are struggling in this thing, with our sisters. Because sadly, most of us, we feel like we cannot talk about these things with another Christians because we are supposed to be Christians or we're supposed to behave a certain way. And what if I say something of this nature to another Christian who we go to church with? What are they going to think of me? No, it should never be that way. As a matter of fact, I think it should be that you should feel free to go and talk to your brothers who are believers about anything without feeling that I'm going to be judged or I'm going to be condemned. Because if we cannot talk to them, who can we talk to? We sometimes fall into the trap of going and talking to an unbeliever, somebody who doesn't have the same point of view, and we open up to them because we feel like we can say anything to them without being judged, but we fail to recognize that they don't look at things the same way as we would, and the advice that they give us might not be the right kind of advice. That we should be able to feel free to talk about these things with other believers without feeling judged or condemned. And then after all this, then the man would go on to say that I would be faithful and loving to you. And then the minister would add 3 areas of life that the couples need to be faithful to one another. One is in plenty and in want, in joy and sorrow, in sickness and in health. In other words, that I make a commitment to be loyal and faithful to you. Whether we have a lot, we have abundance, we are secure financially, or whether we are poor. You know how many relationships fall apart because of financial circumstances? That we get sick and tired of being poor, and we feel like we have enough, and that's it. The situation is not going to get better, and I'm leaving. But you see, we are making a promise before God that whether we are financially stable and secure, or whether we are in a difficult situation financially, that we would not turn our back on one another. But I think, especially as men, that we should really be sincere in trying to provide a good living for our families to the best of our abilities. Some of us are better, some of us maybe are not as good, but that our spouse would know that we are trying our best, that we are not being lazy. But financial hardship is not a good enough reason to part ways and to abandon one another. That we are going to see ourselves through this And in the midst of this, be faithful and committed to each other. The second one is joy and sorrows. And if most of us will live long enough, we will see that in life we are going to have sorrows. We're going to have joys too. But those sorrows should not again make us to abandon our relationship because things are difficult or we don't see how things going to get better. Those times we need to rely on the knowledge that no, I made a commitment to God that I'm going to be with this person and I'm going to be with them. Even though things aren't looking very good right now, our lives are not very happy, we are kind of struggling, but this is part of life. Struggles and sometimes sorrows are part of life. We are not immune from them. And we need to have a commitment that sees us through. And then the third thing that the minister would say is in sickness and in health. Now, this one is an interesting one because we assume that we will be together. But what if all of a sudden something happens to your spouse that neither of you saw coming and it totally changes the course of both of your lives? Would you stay in marriage or would you leave? You see, I personally knew a man that he ended up having cancer, and his wife turned around and said, honey, I'm sorry, this is not what I asked for. I cannot be here. This is too much. And she walked out of the marriage. You see, in life, there are no guarantees that everything would always remain the same. In future, there may be things come our way that we never thought possible, or we never thought that this would happen to us, but it does. But during those times, we need to remember that once again, we made a commitment before God that we said whether we are healthy or sick, that we'll be together. And God is with us. And God would ultimately see us through and make us to be able to adjust to this situation, because sometimes things can get very difficult. But in spite of it, to fall back on the notion that, again, I made a commitment. You see, today we don't think too much about commitments, but we need to see that we made this commitment before God. And success in life is not so much the result of things, but how much we honor God, how much we are true to Him, and how much we obey Him, whether we succeed or not. We need to think differently than a secular person does. That for us, the utmost important should be obedience to God and the commitment we make to God. Now, many times we fall short, but we need to keep striving and evaluating the success of our life that way, not what the result would be. Because many times we may look at our situation and think it's hopeless, so we bail out because we think it's hopeless. But whether it's hopeless or not, we want to fulfill what God has for us, and we want to be true to Him, whether we are happy, unhappy, or no matter what the situation looks like. And these are the things that we are telling to one another that we will do, and we are promising before God that this is how we will behave. And then the minister would tell them to put the ring on each other's finger. And then as they each take turn to put the ring on the other one's finger, they would say, "This ring I give you in token and a pledge of our constant faith and abiding love." In other words, the ring would be a visible representation of the promises I made to you in our wedding day. That every time you see your ring, you should be reminded of what I promised to you before God on that day. And also, when I look at your ring, I should be reminded that yes, these are the things that I promised. And as a ring has no beginning or end, that my love and faithfulness to you would have no beginning or end. And I will fulfill what I promised you before God. And then finally, the minister would make a declaration that whom therefore God has joined together, let no man set apart. You see, whether we realize it or not, when we come together, we are joined and we become one flesh. I know that my wife is the person that God has chosen for me. And God was the one that brought us together. And now we are joined together and have become one flesh. And I will be with this person for the rest of my life. And if I'm going to be with this person for the rest of my life, I might as well make it a good one. I might as well live in such a way that would be as pleasant as it can be. And we will go to whatever uncertainty that will come our way with God. And at the end, the only thing that would separate us is death. But until then, we'll be committed to one another. Now, this is what it means to make vows before God in marriage. And what I'm about to say, I don't want to condemn anyone or make anyone feel bad. But I want you to consider that when we come and live together without being married, what kind of commitment we make to each other. It's just simply based on how we feel at the present time. But what if unforeseen circumstances come our way? Would we still be together? Or would we be part ways or change course? Now, a marriage does not guarantee that we stay together. I realize that. But you should, as much as depends on you, take your commitment to God and what you promise your spouse seriously. Your spouse can do as they please. You don't have control over them, but you have control over yourself. And as for me, I will love you. I'm going to be committed to you, and I will not change course. And I am here until the end. And no matter what comes our way, we will work it out. And the bridges behind me are burned. And under normal circumstances, if there are no abuse or things of that nature, I will be with you for the rest of my days. You and you alone. That's how we should approach our marriages. But we're going to talk more about marriage in future. See how we can maybe be better spouses soon. As a matter of fact, right after the story of the fall, we're going to turn our attention to marriage again and see if we can figure out how we can be better husbands and better wives. But for next time, we are going to take a look at Adam and Eve temptation in the Garden of Eden and what we can learn from that, and spend a little time there in that garden as our forefathers get tempted by Satan, and see what we can learn from them and what we can learn from Satan's tactics. So these are going to be some of the things that we're going to look at for next time. But until then, may the Lord be with you. May He watch over you. May He make His face to shine upon you and give you peace. If the Lord's will, we see each other again next Tuesday night as we go through the Bible together. God bless you. Bye.